Hey everyone, welcome back to K-Korner, the channel where we dive into the wild world of entitled people and their unbelievable stories. Hope you enjoy it, and without further ado, let's go. Habitual lurker, first-time poster, so apologies for anything I missed. No third party may repost or use this in any format. A long time ago in what seems like a different life, I was working in a burrito restaurant on the weekend late shift. Simpler times. During a quiet period, we had a gay couple come in to order. They were very nice and respectful with a good bit of banter thrown in. While we're serving them, another person enters and I'm immediately on high alert. This guy looks like a classic Ned. To those not from the west coast of Scotland, this stands for non-educated delinquent. Think a Karen but more prone to violence than manager asking. Immediately, this guy starts with the homophobic abuse towards the nice couple who we are nearly finished serving, interspersed with some mild nonsense aimed at us. He is quickly told to knock it off and is clearly a little upset at this. The abuse drops to a trickle, but still there and still an unpleasant individual. The nice couple leaves and we're deciding whether to serve this clown or bounce him. Context. I was a collision sport athlete in excellent shape. He wanted absolutely no part of me. But before we decide, he moves on to stage 2 of the Ned playbook, bragging. I don't feel spice. Nothing can hurt me. Give me the spiciest thing you have, etc. Well now, we use ghost chilies, Naga Jolokia, for our extra hot salsa, so we loaded up a burrito with loads of the stuff. But of course, this was not enough for our dear Ned friend, no, because nothing can hurt him. We're obviously not understanding this. Little did he know I'd whipped up a special batch of staff, only extra hot salsa with about 3x the amount of ghost chilies in it. So we tell him about this, and of course it has to go in his burrito, despite our earnings against this. Have we not been listening? He doesn't feel pain? So in goes a generous portion of this nuclear salsa. I know you're thinking we're done here, but no. Our dear friend really doesn't think we've understood how little spice affects him. He needs more. Chop a ghost chili into it. We gave him every opportunity to walk back from this demand, but no. He needs pure ghost chili. I bring one up from our store cupboard and chop a little into his burrito. But haven't I been listening? He needs the whole thing. I end up chopping about 3-4 of the thing into it. I'm looking at this insane burrito worried I might burn a hole in his stomach, but also slightly excited to see this dose of instant karma, but still the bragging hasn't stopped. He won't need a drink. It'll be the mildest thing he's ever eaten. I'm sure you can imagine the rest of his nonsense. He takes the first bite into his burrito and is happily chewing through it, clearly delighted that he was right about the spice level. He's just into his second mouthful when his face changes to concern, followed by surprise and then utter panic. He's backed himself into a corner and there's no way to win. Tears are streaming down his face at this point and he very embarrassedly asks for a drink. But of course Fanta only makes the spice worse. It's now he fully realizes the magnitude of the error he's made. This fire will not go out. He's going to need our genuine help to get through this. He's immediately apologizing humbly and asks if there's something we can do to help. We bring him a large glass of milk so he can at least survive and head off into the night with his tail between his legs. In an unexpected turn, he continues eating the burrito from hell while sipping the milk and somehow manages to finish the whole thing. Still with tears pouring down himself, he thanks us, apologies again, gets a milk reload, and leaves for greener pastures. Despite his unpleasantness, I have to give him props for finishing that burrito. He was not in a good way the entire time, and it was as fitting a punishment as I could have hoped for. When I was in high school back in the late 90s, one of my teachers shared a story with the class in order to explain why we would have a substitute teacher next week. My teacher was in his late 30s, married for only a couple of years, and over the summer he and his wife bought their first house together. As is typical, the house was in a development that had an HOA. While he wasn't thrilled at the idea of a meddling HOA, it is a necessary and unavoidable evil. He went through their CCRs with a fine-tooth comb and decided that while there was some stuff he wasn't a fan of, overall he could live with it, so they signed the papers and bought the house. About a week after they move in, they get a non-compliance letter stating that the tree in their front yard was not an approved species and must be removed. Problem is, the tree was native to that spot, was estimated at 80 to 100 years old, and was a pecan. I mention the type for 2 reasons. First, a pecan produces nuts, obviously, and that is why the HOA said it can't be in the front yard. After all, a lawnmower flings a rogue pecan through a neighbor's window and there will be an issue. The second issue is that this was in the Dallas, Texas area. The pen is the state tree of Texas and as such gets a little legal protection. Basically, to cut one down, you need to have a permit. To get that permit, you have to show the tree is diseased or a hazard. Just being in the way is not sufficient. My teacher is upset as the tree is large, provides lots of shade, and he likes eating pecans. He writes back to the HOA, who turn a deaf ear and point to the CCR and refer him to their legal team for any further questions. He then contacts the county and state, who both come back with he can't remove the tree without a permit, or he will face a large fine and/or jail. He copies that letter and sends it along with his own letter in a certified envelope to the HOA lawyers. The lawyers come back that the CCR is binding. He is not allowed to have fruit or nut-producing trees in his front yard, but ornamental trees of flowers and flower pots are okay. This part is important. If it isn't removed in 30 days, they will begin fining him. At this point, he gets his own lawyer and turns it over to him. A couple of months go by, and we are to the part of this story where he's explaining why there will be a substitute. He will be going to court to have a judge weigh in on the matter. The next week comes, and after the court hearing, he comes in and says that basically he lost as the judge ruled the CCR did apply and the tree had to go. However, since it was a native tree at the time of development, the HOA would be responsible for all expenses of removal, not him as the homeowner. Now, most people probably would have let it go at this point. Sure, you lost the tree, but it isn't costing you anything. Not my teacher. The man decided it was time to protest the overreaching HOA and their absurdity, so he got to reading. After going through the CCRs thoroughly, he took a trip to Home Depot and bought some hose, fittings, and a nicer collar toilet. He set the toilet up in the middle of the yard right where the tree had been and ran the hose and fittings to his outside faucet so that it was hooked up for water in, not hooked to a sewer. This is the front yard after all. He then dumped some potting soil in the bowl and planted some decorative flowers. It took a few weeks, but the non-compliance letter came in stating he had house waste in the front yard and it must be removed within 72 hours, or he would be fined. He wrote back there was no house waste. They responded again, and he stated they needed to come show him where this supposed waste was. The next day, an HOA guy comes out and points right at the toilet and says it cannot be there. It is an eyesore. My teacher responded, "Sorry you feel that way about my self-watering flower pot, but I see nowhere in the CCRs that state what style of flower pot is or is not allowed." HOA guy gets verbally heated and threatens to call the cops, to which my teacher agrees. Having his bluff called, the HOA guy leaves. A week or so goes by, and the class I am in is pestering our teacher every day for news stories on this. He said he got a letter from their lawyers, which he sent straight to his lawyer. His lawyer agreed with him that the CCR in no way, shape, or form puts any qualifiers or limitations on flower pots, and as the flowers are clearly visible, it doesn't constitute debris or trash in the yard. A few back and forth things happen between the lawyers, and then the HOA moves for a trial, which gets the same judge as before. The judge reviewed the case and dismissed it as frivolous. He did put in his remarks or decision something along the lines of, while the defendant's choice of a flower pot is eye-raising and isn't traditional, there is nothing illegal about his use of a commode as art in his yard. The plaintiff has failed to demonstrate any sound reason this would violate existing rules and bylaws of their association. Many years ago, I was living in a beautiful, sunny southern state. I had a cute little house that was completely fenced in, 5 fence in front, 8 fence on the sides, and a 10 chain link fence in the back. I'm fortunate enough to work from home. My office was my patio, unless it was raining. My dog, Sari, German Shepherd Rottweiler mix, kept me company. At a year old, she was a big girl at 120 ops. She was generally very sweet and kind but protective. She was well-trained but also had a knack for disappearing to play with her animal friends, so I kept her on a chain too if we were outside. High school kids in the area had the tendency to use the alleyway behind my house to get to house from school. Most would stop and say hi to Sari and give her attention. She loved it. I honestly didn't mind. One day, I noticed that any time Sari was alone outside, some kids would rattle the back fence, throw things at it, then scream and yell at Sari. The kids would run off before I could see who they were. In case things got worse, I bought some security cameras and brought Sari with me anytime I went inside when the kids would be around. One day I had to grab some work in the house and left Sari outside. Just for a moment. From inside, I heard the fence rattle and then Sari yelp in pain. I rushed outside just in time to see a kid try to throw a rock at Sari, along with some other kids. I was pissed. As I rushed over to Sari, I calmly asked them, "Did it ever occur to you to wonder why I keep my dog chained in a fenced yard?" Then I unhooked her. Sari ran at my back fence and climbed over it. The kids started running down the alley with Sari right behind them, barking away. I let her go about 1-2 block, then whistled for her. She came trotting back, all happy as can be. I checked her over and gave her a treat. She was fine. A couple of hours later, one of the kids came back with his mother, EP. EP screaming, "You witch! You had your dog attack my son!" He was only having a fun time. "He's just a boy. The kid was at least 16, yo."
You scared him. It was just a joke. You had no right to do that. I'm calling the police and having that dog shot.
Blah, blah, blah. I literally couldn't get a word in. Then she starts threatening me, so I called the police. The operator could hear her plain as day, even though EP was at least 40 feet from me. The police showed up in about 5 minutes. 2 cars. I guess they were in the area. 4 officers. All very nice guys. 2 officers come talk to me. The other 2 talk to EP and her son. EP never stopped screaming and cussing. I explained what happened and showed the video to the officers. Show all of Sari's vet and training paperwork. I filed a report. Asked to press charges. The officers are petting Sari all the while because she's demanding attention from her new friends. She has her happy face on. Yes, Sari actually smiles. The 3 of us and Sari, on a leash, go outside towards the other group. We're about 10 feet from them when Sari suddenly cuts in front of me to stop me and starts growling. The skin around her face went tight, making it look like a hair-covered skull. The hair on her back raises up. Sari is very scary when she's like that. EP screaming, "See, that witch raised that dog to attack black people. Racist witch. That dog needs to be put down." The 2 officers that were with me were African American. So, no. That part always annoys me, so I included it. I called back one of the officers that I'd been talking to. He didn't want to come too close, as Sari is showing large teeth. So I moved back towards my house. As quietly as I could, I told the officer that either EP or kid were carrying a gun. That's why Sari started getting protective. It had happened several times before. I guess to be on the side of caution, or to shut me up, he decided to search the EP and kid. EP had an unregistered gun. Kid had a 6 switchblade, not legal in that state. So, in addition to a charge of animal cruelty, they got nailed for carrying a concealed weapon, being in possession of a firearm while on probation, resisting arrest, and a couple of other charges. EP never stopped screaming the entire time this happened and while being driven away. I don't think that's how EP or Kid expected to end the day, but I enjoyed it. Even better, I never saw her or her kid again, and Kid stopped harassing Sari. It took 2 days to destroy the life of my abusive mother. We had a long story, of course. I cut my contacts with her 6 years ago and just disappeared. I got in contact with my niece, let's call her Eva, 18-year-old. A while ago, my mother, Hope, 63-year-old, became her caregiver sometime after I left. Now Eva lives with me and my husband. Eva chose to help her grandmother, my mother, financially even after she moved away from her. I didn't get involved with it. As I've told, it's her choice. Eva has left her cash card to Hope under one simple condition. Hope should notify her if she is going to put or withdraw cash from her card. Hope was free to buy anything she needed with the card. The only thing she has to do is notifying whether she wanted to use the card in other financial operations. Eva was regularly putting money on the card. She've also paid Hope's rent for a year in advance because my mother cannot afford rent and could turn homeless without help. My mother screwed me up when I was young and trying to help her, so I refused to get involved with it, and my siblings refused too because of her behavior. Hope was abusing Eva's help for a while with not notifying her, and Eva knew about it. She wasn't okay with it, of course, but let it slip until yesterday. It turned out that Hope gave Eva's card to the third person for a free use, including putting and withdrawing cash. Eva wrote her asking what phone, why is she using her card this way without asking? Hope used her best strategy. She blamed Eva for being a jerk. She said that she had no choice. One of the things Hope have said to her that if Eva really mean to help her, then she should shut up and do it without words and conditions, and that Eva doesn't have a right to complain. She've also said that Eva is free to betray her and leave as me and my siblings did after we used her, including one of my older brothers who hadn't even lived with her from the age of 11, and Hope never did a thing for him since. We've had a long conversation with Eva after that. I once again explained that all of this is not Eva's fault and that my mother was always been like that. I wasn't even surprised for the answer Eva has got. I've got similar answers when I was younger. Hope didn't change at all. Next day, Eva told Hope that she is still waiting apologies. She told Hope a ton of things about violation of their agreement, about her manipulations, about her not listening and not caring for people who was trying their best to support her, which is why they are leaving her all the time. She pointed out that the current problem is that Hope is crossing all the boundaries set, and that not knowing about what is happening with her bank card can put Eva in serious trouble, especially the giving the card away. I've seen screenshots, and after reading all of that, I believe that Eva tried her best to explain Hope her position. All that Hope said was, "I understood. You are blaming me for being a terrible person, and I don't want to fight. Go away. Live your life. Feel free to not care about me anymore. I will better be homeless than be treated like that." Now Eva had blocked her card, and neither Hope nor the third person cannot use it. Eva will also not pay for rent anymore, so in July Hope will need to find a place to live in. Eva also called all the relatives who had supported my mother. They are shocked and will never help her anymore, as the things Hope told them was completely different, but apparently Hope was like that from the young age. They didn't know how Hope had been treating her children and grandchildren, and they thought that in her 50s Hope had finally settled down and matured. They gave Eva their full support, and they advised her to run away, cut Hope off, and never cross with her again. They're going to stay in touch with Hope as she is their sister, but they will never believe her again. They have also asked about me. I lived with them when I was a child, and I never called them since I turned 18, which is a different story, and I'm the only person to blame. I love them, but I also didn't want to harm them, and I actually never believed they would trust me, as Hope did insane things to me and my siblings, which they didn't know about. I've got their number from Eva, and I'm going to call them this Saturday and talk it all through. Hope have befriended some of my school teachers I was close when I was a teen, and I'm going to find their phones and talk to them too. I do not know if this will work, but also, I don't want Hope to use them, as no one from her family will support her anymore. I'm enraged for all the things she told to Eva. So in 2 days, Hope have lost her family and her house. Not now, but in the future for sure. I will also try to make her to lose her friends, so she would have no one to turn to in need. And you know what? She deserved it for years of abuse. It took me a long time for figuring out what can I do, but we will make her completely destroyed for all that she's done. I'm not sorry for that, and I'm pretty sure right now that I'm doing the right thing. I don't want Eva to be as broken. Enjoying the stories yet? If you do, please subscribe, like, and comment. Around the time that I got my first full-time job and finished college, I decided I was ready to venture out and start dating. I had heard about this amazing app through a few of my coworkers, a little thing called Tinder, so I decided to give it a shot. After about a week on the app, I finally matched with a woman who we will call Talia. Talia lived in a different city than I did, but the day we matched, she said she was visiting a cousin. We messaged through the app, and after verifying she was real through her Facebook and Instagram profiles, we exchanged phone numbers. She said she was employed full-time, had an apartment and her own car, and was somehow still single. We talked for about 2 weeks on the phone, always at night after my shift at work, before we finally had a chance to meet when our schedules matched up. I drove my beat-up 1996 Honda Civic to her town, hung out that Friday night. I forget where we ate that night, and in the morning we had breakfast at Waffle House. Talia did have her own apartment. However, she lived next door to her grandmother, who I awkwardly had to meet. I learned from Talia that her car was actually in her grandmother's name, and her apartment was in the name of her cousin. She went so far as to show me family portraits with her cousin, to talk about her abusive ex, and even shared with me how her laundry room was embarrassingly infested with flies and roaches. We officially changed our social media to dating that day. Keep in mind that this was my first relationship in almost 4 years, so I was excited. The scam. Talia also told me that day that she had been fired from work about a week earlier, but was too embarrassed to tell me. I asked how she had kept up her bills, and she said that her grandma and dad had been helping her. Talia asked if I could help her make her car payment, which was due that weekend. I refused. She then explained that she could get a payday loan, which is banned in our state, and could put it into my checking account. I felt uneasy about it and asked if there was another way she could get the loan. Talia said that she couldn't use her grandma or dad's accounts because they had burned her in the past. I thought it was weird, but she started crying. So I called my bank, where I had an account since high school graduation, and opened a linked checking account. I gave Talia the new checking account number and routing number. Talia contacted a payday loan company in Alabama, and by Sunday morning, she had the funds in my linked checking account. Per our agreement, I gave her the money. Talia promised to repay the loan within 2 weeks. I had my reservations but went back home and back to work Monday. Talia called me on Wednesday and said she had a new job. I asked if she had the payday loan squared away with her first paycheck. She said she did, but I still got charged $47 2 weeks after she set up the loan. I called my bank, called Talia to verify the loan was going through her, and terminated the charge from the payday loan as I was not the signed person. Talia and I agreed to meet on Memorial Day weekend 2 weeks later. She stated that her dad had given her a check for the entire loan amount, $1,800, and that she would deposit into my bank near her. Like a fool, I let her deposit the check right before Memorial Day weekend. 2 weeks later, the payday loan company charged another $47 plus penalty fees and another $47. The $1,800 check bounced. Talia stopped answering her calls and blocked me on everything. I called my bank and informed them that I was a victim of fraud. Within hours, my main checking account, into which my paycheck had gone, my savings account with $800 saved for a new car, and the new checking account were closed. My best friend from college, we'll call him Clark, found Talia had 2 of every social media account, the one she shared with me and the one on which she had a boyfriend. Her cousin from her family photos was actually her boyfriend since high school. Talia was 22, 23. Her boyfriend, we'll call him Jason, was in prison, but from their social media posts, she was visiting him once a month minimum and had plans to marry him. I spent days trying to get back my accounts and my money. One of the representatives from my bank and Clark and my mom advised that I should press charges for fraud. My bank mailed me a copy of the bounced check for criminal investigation purposes, and it showed Jason's name and not Talia's father's name as the owner of the check. That's when I decided to get revenge. As mentioned before, Talia's apartment had a minor infestation of roaches and flies in her laundry room. While I went through legal agencies to pursue pressing charges of forgery on the check, fraud, etc., I found the name and phone number of Talia's apartment complex. I left a message for the apartment complex management that Talia and her grandmother both had filthy apartments. Within a week, Clark showed me that Talia had posted a request for temporary housing for her and her grandma, since her parents wouldn't let her move in. Talia's payday loan company began calling me as Talia had given them my phone number instead of hers, and they had not received payment yet. I was still reviewing my legal options at the time. One day, I answered and notified the rep that Talia had fraudulently used my checking account. The rep who called me transferred me to their legal department, who was very interested. It turned out that Talia's grandma and her father owed money to the payday loan company. It wasn't a lot separately, but the payday loan company had enough evidence with my claim that Talia was the ringleader using her family's accounts. I turned over my evidence, including Talia's text messages promising to pay, the copy of the bounced check, and my bank statements. By the end of the year, Talia was arrested on several charges. Her grandma and father were also arrested, but took pleas for lesser charges in exchange for turning over evidence on her. I didn't have to testify at the trial, but I kept informed. Talia's grandma had had a minor heart attack when she was arrested and had a more significant one during the trial. I'm not sure if her grandma lived or died after the trial. Despite this, Talia went to prison for multiple counts and will serve more than a decade behind bars. A few years ago, I was working for a local health department, and part of my duties included the weekly monitoring of water quality at public beaches for E. coli levels. It was a straightforward process. I'd visit the lakes, collect multiple samples in 100 ml bottles, and then take the samples to a nearby lab that the county had a contract with for analysis. Well, it would have been straightforward, if it wasn't for Chumley. He earned the nickname because of his striking resemblance to the character from the Tennessee Tuxedo cartoons. Although I guess a comparison to the Pawn Star version wouldn't be entirely inaccurate. Chumley was the lab tech who took delivery of the samples and then ran the tests. Simply put, the guy was a jerk. He was doing entry-level lab work, but had the demeanor of someone who was deciding where to put the Nobel Prize for chemistry that was inevitably coming his way. He also viewed all incoming clients as interruptions and looked at us as if we should bow with gratitude that he would take time away from his vital work to deign to speak with such lowly peons. The first half of that summer, other staff had been monitoring the lakes, and it wasn't until the beginning of July that there was a shuffling of duties and I took over. Soon after I began getting the test results, I got the feeling that something wasn't right. The test reported the amount of E. coli present as a given number of colony-forming units, CFUs. Anything over 300 CFUs and we would issue an advisory. On a good week, the typical range for these lakes was something along the lines of 30, 100 CFUs. But the numbers I was seeing now were in the low teens or even single digits. Given the number of geese, and by extension, geese droppings, that I routinely saw, those numbers were just a little bit too good to be true. Adding to my suspicion was the dramatic change in test results the previous summer when the contract for testing passed from one lab to the one that Chumley worked at. In the years prior to the switch, there would be about 40, 50 individual samples that came back as high for the summer. The year that the switch occurred, the number dropped to 5. The year that I took over, up to that point, 0. So now I'm more than a little suspicious. The next time I dropped off samples, I asked Chumley if there might be a problem with the test, as those numbers just didn't seem plausible. Keep in mind, I didn't accuse him personally of incompetence, as I acknowledged that it very well could have been a problem with the test itself. The response I got was the jerk love child of indignation and condescension. Apparently, the problem was that I didn't understand the real science behind what he was doing, and I should just leave things to the professionals. Okay, up to this point, I was just trying to get to the bottom of the suspicious results. You know, the results that may have been telling little kids it was safe to go swimming in disgusting pools. Now I was genuinely mad, so I went to my boss with my concerns and suggested a simple test. The next time I collected samples, I would collect one extra. I would intentionally spike this sample with some of the readily available goose droppings, while I wouldn't be able to determine just how much coli. I was adding, if the testing was accurate, the spike sample should at least be significantly higher than the others taken from the same location. My boss agreed, and I collected my samples. The results that came back on my special sample, 0. Not none detected, but 0. Anyone who has done any quantitative work would know that is a huge no. Now I might not be as scientifically savvy as Chumley, but I'm pretty sure that this was evidence that something was wrong. I gave the results, along with the photos I took of the process, to my boss, who promptly had a meeting with the owner of the lab. Shortly after that, the lab lost the contract for all the work that was being done for the county, although it was called a non-renewal. While we are not talking about a loss of revenue significant enough to drive them into bankruptcy, it certainly made a sizable dent in the bottom line. What was the final fate of Chumley? I can't think that an employee who blatantly disregarded valid concerns and cost his company thousands of dollars would have a bright future. Screw you, Chumley. All you had to do was not be a jerk. So for a bit on context, I'm a management consultancy contractor, which for most people means I'm a generalist with 1 or 2 specialization. Unfortunately, this is not the case since I'm actually an ex-management consultancy executive, which means I have corporate HR and legal training, which is important later. This happened about 8 years ago. I was working on a massive organizational transformation program involving 80,000 staff, with my part covering 40,000 staff. As you can imagine, it's really critical to get buy-in and have high levels of engagement with the staff through a team of consultants with professional behaviors. One of the key aspects of this new way of working was that it should be adopted through a team that embodied the new way of working, and that was out strategy. As part of my work, I needed to build out a team because, frankly, there was no way I could do all the work by myself. I have a rule. Everyone works, no hierarchy. Even if I had extra duties, I would not ask others to do things I would not do myself. I was fortunate to internally hire a few people, all contractors coming to the end on their existing contracts, who knew the score that as a contractor, we work really hard and are focused on competing work, not serving time. I also met a person I will call Mrs. Awesome. She basically ran the whole program as a PM in the PMO office. I'd helped her rebuild all the reporting in Day, as they had moved Jira versions, and expected her to know the new version. Not my job, but I'm a team player and Jira admin. She, in turn, suggested her boyfriend for one of my open roles. Let's call him Mr. Awesome. He was, as the title says, a great consultant, thoughtful, creative, and open to leaning, as we all should be. As part of this drive, I was given a perm member of staff we can call Gail. She talked a great game, but clearly did not understand the mechanics of change or what we were trying to do. Also, she was unaware that her role was being demised at the end of the year since her skill set was that of a personal assistant and she was not technical. Finally, we get to the EP. Let's call her Karen. It is, after all, her real name. Gail hired her in without telling me, which of course was a big red flag. However, I work with people, handing out rope to see what they do with it. So I get feedback from everyone. It's part of our new way of working, to have daily calls and to take feedback at the executive level across the whole transformation. Clearly, everyone has an agenda, and personal likes or dislikes can color what people say. However, actions are very hard to hide. I was not present at the incident, but since there was raised voices involved, I heard about it pretty quickly, from multiple witnesses, but not from anyone involved. As the accountable person, it means I have to investigate, hear everyone's perspective, and decide what is best for my client, their reputation, and of course the health of the transformation. First, I email Karen to ask her about the incident, and ask her to explain what happened and why I had not been told about it. Her response was that she worked for Gail, that she did not report to me, and that it was none of my business. I was surprised with this response since it was so defensive and all of it was wrong. Everyone in the team was coming out of my multi-million-pound budget. Okay, note to self, catch up with Gail on a couple of points. Same email to Mr. Awesome, he explained that Karen had tried to order him to do some of her work. He explained to Karen that he was busy with work I had set him. She became aggressive and told him that she worked for the perm Gail and that if he did not do as she said, she would get him fired. He refused. I sent another email asking why he had not told me, and he said he did not want to make things worse. I asked him to keep notes on any further engagement with Karen or Gail. At this point, I had done the baseline investigation, so I contacted our HR business partner for advice. It's really important to create data points because at this point I was not sure what had happened or why, regardless of what I had been told. Next, I contacted Gail because she had hired Karen. I asked about what had happened and Karen's belief that she did not work for me. Gail confirmed that Karen had told her that Mr. Awesome had been aggressive when she asked for help, and that she was happy to work this through with Karen and Mr. Awesome. I think she was really surprised when I said no. I had previously asked for Karen's CV but had not arrived. I now formally requested it as part of the investigation. She complied as she could see where this was going. It turned out that Karen had no skills or experience related to the work she was being asked to do by me through Gail. And it transpired that Gail was using her as a PA. For context, a contact PA was on SON 150 a day and Karen was on 600 a day as Gail had got her this job. The fog was becoming clearer now. Karen was being put on the spot to cover up the fact that she did not know how to do the work. Unfortunately, because I had conflicting stories, the next step was to interview everyone involved. I first requested a chat with Karen. She found excuses to not have the meeting. Mr. Awesome arranged one ASAP. I had my meeting with Mr. Awesome. He did not embellish anything, but was quite disturbed by the threat to his job by Karen. I informed him that neither Karen nor Gail had any such authority and that HR had been engaged regarding the incident. He looked relieved and asked about what happens next. I advised I would give Karen the same opportunity to give her side and then speak to the witnesses. Over a 2-week period, I tried to nail Karen down to a meeting every time she came up with an excuse about a meeting or a call, which I knew to be a lie since I could see her calendar. Given this behavior, I contacted HR again, advised of my experience so far, Karen's behavior, and lack of professional skill. They advised that I terminate her contract and have a member of security on the floor should they be needed. I finally managed to get a meeting with Karen. Gail was present, however, Karen would not come into the meeting room. At this point, I was still willing to work with her, but unfortunately, she aggressively told me from the open plan office space I had no authority over her. I expect it was a great show from the main office. I invited her into the room. She refused again. At this point, I'd had enough. I called a security guard and then told her to put her ID card on the desk and that she would be escorted out of the building. And this is when it went nuclear. She went insane, shouting and cursing just in time for the security guard to arrive. He took her ID pass, would not let her pick up the work computer, and escorted her from the building. Mr. Awesome and Mrs. Awesome were in the open plan office space and saw everything. Gail just carried on as if nothing had happened. I worked in a nursery school in an expensive neighborhood of an expensive city. We had 24 3-year-olds in the class. By May, we took a walking field trip 1 day a week to a playground 4 blocks away. We'd take snacks and some balls to play with on the b-ball court and baseball field, and at least 4 parents would come with us to help supervise because the area was spread out and kids can zip away unless extra eyes help keep track. The children had been playing, and of course there were other children and parents and nanny-siettes at the playground as well. We got all our children together for a snack. They sat on picnic blankets and had crackers and apples and water. It's a nursery school, so there's always a chaotic aspect to it, trying to keep everyone seated and hands sanitized and pass food in water cups and give additional servings when kids are done and collect trash. This day is special, though it was a birthday. One child was wearing a colorful paper crown, and the parent was one of our chaperones and brought cupcakes for the class. The children ate their healthy food, and we sang happy birthday, and several adults helped pass out the cupcakes to our large group of 3-year-olds clamoring for sugary treats. In the midst of all this hurry, a dad and his kid bellied up to the picnic table where the box of cupcakes were, and he had the gumption to ask, "My daughter saw your cupcakes and she was wondering if she can have one too." The girl was about the same age as our class, and she was entirely quiet. I had no idea if she'd asked her dad or if it was his idea. She definitely wasn't fussing about it or asking as far as I saw. I found the request completely exasperating. I told him, "You can see we have a large school group to look after. I don't know if there will be any cupcakes left for your kid. Excuse me, I need to pass out cupcakes to the class." I dropped off some cupcakes and came back for more. The guy was still there and speaking with the birthday child's parent who, much nicer than I, passed this entitled person a cupcake for his kid. Whatever. The end. No. A week or two later, we were back at the playground on our regular day. To exit the park, the children had to walk up a long ramp to the gate and exit onto the sidewalk we took back to school. Our jostling group had their jackets and were finding partners' hands and such. When my coworker and I noticed the cupcake-begging dad was there, setting up a birthday party for his daughter at the picnic tables. Coworker and I are toward the front of the line, and we emerge from the ramp onto the sidewalk while we wait for the rest of the kids and adults to straggle up the ramp. The fence surrounding the playground is covered with thick vines that look like a hedge. You can't see through them at all. My coworker and I were talking about noticing the little girl's dad setting up the birthday party. I cracked a joke that I should have gone up to him and asked for 24 cupcakes for our whole class. We had just started to cackle when the dad stepped through the gate. There was no way he didn't hear us, 6 feet away on the other side of the fence, walking toward us as we spoke the last couple sentences. He skittered by, looking down, and didn't say anything. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more captivating stories. Share your own experiences, opinions in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic tales.